you can feel these muscles. They're shortening and they're lengthening, but we can't feel them. However, the pelvic floor muscles are definitely the only muscles in the human body that when you let them go, you feel them let go. And when you squeeze them, you also feel them shorten. And when you let go, you should also feel them relax. If you push them, you should also feel them lengthen much more. So everybody's doing that right now, I know, because I just did. Okay? So everybody's face just went. That's good. So if you can't feel it, don't worry. It's okay. You might want to call me later. Okay? Probably don't want to live the rest of your life not knowing how to use these muscles, but what we're going to do is we're all going to sit at the edge of our seat. Have a drink of wine. Okay? You're going to split your legs a little bit wide. Sorry, ladies. I'm going to make you feel a little uncomfortable here. Get the legs a little wider, and you're going to sit on the front of your sit bones. Okay? So when you're sitting on those bones, I want you to sit on the front of them. So you got to tip forward a little bit. Okay? All right. Now, everybody's going to take the balloon. Wait, don't blow it up just yet. You're going to take the balloon and you're going to blow the balloon up. While you're blowing the balloon up, I want you to focus on what's happening here in your perineum. Right down in the vagina, in the testicles, in the anus, wherever you want to go, but bring your mind to that area of the body. And I want you to feel what happens. One of two things is going to happen. I'm going to wait. You're all going to do it first, and then I'll explain. Okay? So go ahead. Well, one of three things. And if you can't blow up a balloon, make sure it's homework. And so you can blow it up. And I'm not kidding about that.
Make sure
it's okay. Just keep trying. But if it's a difficult thing, and you're not the only one, there's actually, I'm always surprised. If it's a difficult thing, it's something that you definitely want to work on because you're not the only one that can't do it. I always come across people who cannot do this. It's a lung capacity issue more than anything. So you need to work on it. So, where did we feel it? Or what? So, first of all, what did we feel? Nothing? Okay, that's one of the three things. Nothing.
Vagina.
What did you feel down there?
It kind of felt like it was contracting, sort of, in a way. I don't know.
Like you were trying to prevent the passing of gas?
No, like I was
you were trying to.
I blew out the balloon, I just felt
like you were trying to push, or you were trying to stop the passing of gas.
I'm not trying to poo.
Okay.
Yeah.
So try it again. Okay. So all good. Yeah. So try and pay attention because one of three things is going to happen. Either you're not going to feel anything at all. Okay. You're either going to feel like you're going to poop or pee. Okay, probably more poop. Or you're going to feel like you're trying not to poop, or you're trying not to fart.
If I felt those.
Maybe that's what it is.
So, hang on. If you felt any of those three, now I want you to do the opposite of what you just felt. So if you felt like you were pooping while you were blowing the balloon up,
yeah.
I now want you to stop yourself from farting, hold it, and then blow the balloon up. Is that clear to everybody?
So prior to blowing the balloon, stop it.
Stop, and then blow. See, contract like you're trying to not pass gas, and then blow that balloon up.
But if you didn't feel that
one and you felt yourself, well, it depends which one you felt. So I just want you to know that you should be able to do and or at any time. Like you should be able to push like you're going to poop, or you should be able to contract and hold against pressure. That's really hard.
it's hard. By holding it, fine.
Yeah, because you're trying to withstand the internal pressure.
Yeah.
But you should be able to do both.
Yeah. If I'm not trying to poop or fart, where then should I feel it?
Sorry, if you're not trying to poop or fart, then the sensation should be a lengthening like you're going to poop. It should be a feeling of dropping. The whole bucket, this whole area here,
yeah.
It should feel like it's coming down. But if you're trying not to do that, then what happens is it
Yes.
contracts and it goes up.
That's what I felt.
Okay, so then can you do the opposite?
I did that before.
Perfect. So then you should be able to do both at any given time. So that's
Oh, okay.
fantastic for you if
Okay.
you can. That's great.
All right.
Okay. Whew. Your pelvic is winning. Okay. So that's just a real simple test. Okay, and it's just for you to realize that these are the only muscles in the body that we can sense changing. But how many people are ever really consciously thinking about, can I do that? Can I let go of my muscles down there? Can I push them? Can I squeeze them? Can I squeeze them higher? Can I cough and hold them so that I don't leak? Have I lost that reflex? Have I forgotten that I'm supposed to cough, hold and then cough? These are all things we look at when I'm doing an assessment, because 30% of women think that they're actually contracting when they're pushing, and that's because they probably had babies. And so everything just gets backwards in the brain. All right? Okay. Cool stuff, right? Maybe? I get excited. Yeah. All right. Okay, so what causes pelvic floor dysfunction? We talked about it, we touched on it, right? We've got the weakness in the pelvic floor, we've got excessive tension in the pelvic floor muscles. We've talked about how it could be a combination of both, right? You can have some high tension because of chronic stress and exposure to stress, whether it's emotional or physical. And then on top of that, you can have some weakness from having had children or multiple births, or even just getting into menopause. There's a number of things. So you can have a combination of those things. And then the other one is poor body awareness and poor intercore strength. So those are the ones we just touched on, right? These are symptoms that you would experience if you had a hypertonic, so a tight pelvic floor, or a hypotonic pelvic floor. So underactive, overactive, or again, you remember you can have a combination of both. So I'm not going to read them all out. You guys can see here if any of these particular symptoms are things you've ever experienced in your lifetime. Maybe in the back. Should I read it out? I don't know if you guys can see it in the back.
I can.
Are you guys okay to see it? Yeah, perfect. So any of those conditions. Do you need me to?
No, it's good.
You're good? Okay. Has everybody had a minute there? We can move on. This is just knowledge again, right? This is just so you guys can maybe, oh, my mother, my daughter, because kids suffer from these things too, right? I treat women, men, and children. Children, actually, interestingly enough, we do it a little bit different because internal exams are 95% of the time contraindicated. Okay, sometimes you have to do internals on kids, certainly if they have the congenital deformities I've discussed. And on occasion we have to do balloon catheter techniques to get them to sense the poop inside of the rectum. So there are times when we do have to do or insert devices to help them regain function. But these conditions affect all of us, right? So the knowledge you're getting today and these symptoms that you see here, just kind of put them in the back of your brain so that maybe if you come across it, or your niece, your nephew, somebody in your life is going to be suffering from these. Okay, and maybe we don't always think about that. And a big one that often gets overlooked is the chronic hip pain and low back pain, unresolved. No matter what you've been doing, you've seen every chiro, every massage therapist, every physio, you've had acupuncture, you've had everything done, and nothing gets better. And it's because you probably haven't looked inside. Remember, these guys stabilize the entire pelvic floor, or pelvis itself. And they have help from external muscles, but most of the time when I check people's stabilizing muscles, they're extremely weak. And so hence, unit 2, lower extremity stability. So we look at strengthening all those muscles that help assist the pelvic floor muscles. So what's the treatment? We've touched on it. Okay, I've kind of explained to you how we approach it. Yes, there is an internal exam. Is it necessary? Never. This is your body. You're the boss. I do what you say I can do and what you allow me to do. With kids, we use external capacities. So we have machines that basically have muscle readers that we connect just to the anus. So we basically put a sticker on this side of the bum of the anus, and then we put a sticker on this side, and then it conducts, or it projects an image up on a screen, And then they can see the electrical activity of their pelvic floor muscles just by watching the screen, and then we can play video games with them and they have fun with that. But it's a great way, and if there is ever any kind of religious issues with it, or just, I just don't feel comfortable. Sometimes it takes time to develop a relationship and feel comfortable with the whole idea. But you can imagine, we've already touched on how many external things I need to fix anyways before we even maybe get to the internal stuff. Okay, so I don't want you going and out of here thinking that, oh, to have a pelvic floor physio assessment, it's absolutely necessary. No, there's so many things that we can do that are extremely important, and they'll make a big difference to the function of your pelvic floor well before we even consider doing an internal, if that's not something you're comfortable with. Okay, and I can respect that completely. But like I said, we are going to be looking at coordinating the breath. So we're going to look at restoring the breath and making sure that it's working in unison with the pelvic floor. We're going to do some trigger point releases internally if that's what's found. Skin rolling, that's a big one. And actually, I'm glad I just remembered that one. The pelvic floor muscles are actually really interesting in the way that they're anatomically positioned in the pelvic floor. These are the only muscles in the entire body that adhere or glue to the walls of bones, or the pelvis in this case, via a structure called connective tissue. Does anybody know what that is, connective tissue? You know when you have a chicken breast and there's that kind of like white shiny coat on top, and like we try to rip that off and then we throw it out? Okay, well that stuff is the star player in your human body. It has over 100 million nerve endings that activate it. And anytime you experience any kind of stress in your life, that tissue has a propensity to tighten. And it just shrink wraps itself around the structure that's been injured or that's been under stress. So if you are physically under stress or emotionally under stress, and it's not a physical trauma or insult to the tissue, your body, the entire body, will tighten up. But because these are the only muscles, so every other muscle in the human body goes from a muscle and then it gets into a different structure called a tendon, okay, and it feels very different. Like a muscle is soft, and then a tendon is very hard in its structure, and then it anchors onto a bone. Okay, but we can't have this structure in here because these tendons have little sensors in them that relay messages up to the brain saying, too much force, or too much stretch, stop, stop, stop. Could you imagine if you had tendons in there and you were like, oh, having a baby, sorry, can't do that. Or I'm going to jump, I'm going to sneeze, I'm going to cough, I'm going to run, I'm going to lift, I'm going to do anything that puts load on the pelvic floor. Oh, no, that's too much, that's not going to work. It wouldn't make any sense. So because these guys adhere to the walls of the pelvic floor, or the pelvis, via that connective tissue, they are the first muscles in the human body that respond to stress, and they tighten up. And so a lot of the chronic pelvic pain syndromes occur because of tension and exposure to chronic stress, so not managing that stress. So that's why the management of stress and relaxation techniques are a huge part when we're dealing with chronic pain. And pain, 100% of the time, is an output of the brain. There are no sensors in your body that are pain sensors. We have 3 types of sensors in the body: pressure, chemical, and temperature sensors. That's it. And so those 3 sensors, if there's pressure on the outside of your arm, that sensor will relay a message to the brain saying, hey brain, there's pressure on the outside of your right arm. Brain says, thank you, it's fine. It's just pushing his fingers, pushing. Now if that's a car crushing my arm, those sensors are now relaying the information up to the brain, intensely saying, hey brain, there's a lot of pressure on the arm, and the brain decides, oh, I should probably try to get you out of there. So you try to get you to pull out, but it's not going to make you feel pain because it's more important that you get your arm out of that car. Pain in that moment is not appropriate. So you will not experience pain in that moment. Let's go to a more extreme example. A girl out in Australia surfing, falls off her surfboard, shark rips her arm off. Does she feel pain in that moment? No. Missing her arm completely? No, not appropriate. So tissue damage does not equal pain. The brain decides 100% of the time whether pain is appropriate or not. And in that moment, the brain said, well, there's a shark there, you're bleeding to death, and we're about 20 meters from shore. Can't make you feel pain because you'll die. And the brain is only concerned with one thing, is survival. And says, instead I'm going to lace you with all the endorphins that I can possibly find, all the adrenaline that I can possibly generate in your body, and off you go. And she does. And she gets to safety. And until this day, in all the interviews she's ever done, she said, never once did I feel pain. Certainly afterwards, the phantom limb pain that comes with having lost a limb, that's very real. But again, tissue damage does not equal pain. So when we suffer from chronic pain, or we suffer from a tension situation, that squeezes all the nerves, the arteries, the veins. It crushes everything internally. Imagine how confined this is. We touched on that in the beginning. that's not going to be a good scenario. Those pressure sensors, those chemical sensors, all those temperature sensors, they're going to send those messages up to the brain and say, hey, brain, something's going on. And then the brain sends a little bit of pain, and they're like, we'll ignore it. And then eventually it gets really bad, and the stress doesn't get managed, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and then eventually it just becomes too much, and you're in just a disastrous state. You can no longer function. And that was the chronic pelvic pain syndrome that we touched on, and trivia answer number 3. Now you know, okay? That's the most important part. So, guys, that's basically the extent of it. I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight and taking some time to learn about a topic that will most likely affect you at some point in your life. And if it's not affecting you, it's definitely affecting somebody that you know. And because you came tonight, you are going to be able to make somebody else's life better and change the quality of their life and free them hopefully from the conditions that they're living with. So I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Can I take any questions?
I got a question.
Yes.
What were you saying about the chemical? You've got pressure sensors in your body and chemical sensors. What do they do?
So the chemical sensors would be something like oxygen, too much oxygen, too little oxygen, too much carbon dioxide, too much nitrogen, too much any chemical imbalance in the body. You're going to have sensors that are going to detect any change to any imbalance. The body's always looking to stay into homeostasis. Right?
So then it'll send a message to your brain saying
If there's
something's
something's
wrong.
off, if there's something off, then you're going to get the message, and then the brain's going to kind of go and analyze what's going on and see, okay, can we fix that, or should I
So would that be
notify
something
them?
like lactic acid?
Well, yeah, you kind of know that you're going to feel some pain there, right? Like that burn that you would get from a workout. You'll feel that because there's a buildup of lactic acid, but once that now is eliminated, right, you have to stop because the pain becomes too intense.
Right.
And actually, too much hydrogen in the muscle anyways will bind well before calcium does, and that's essentially what causes the muscle contraction to cease. And then once that falls off, then you can get a replenishment, and then the muscle can go again. But that's a little bit different because now you're looking at muscle physiology, but that's just, it's part of that though.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have one other question.
Yeah.
What is the name of the muscle in the pelvic floor?
Yeah, so there's actually several. We call this basically, people work, well, there's a bunch. You can call it the levator ani.
The what?
Levator
Levator.
ani.
Ani.
So it lifts the anus,
Gotcha.
right? And then there's a series that come from the pubic bone all the way down back to the tailbone. So you've got the puborectalis, the one that wraps around the rectum. You've got the pubococcygeus, the one that goes from the pubic bone to the coccyx,
So there's
to
a
the
bunch of
tailbone.
muscles there.
Yeah, you've got the obturator internus, the piriformis, both of those are external rotators. They come out to the hip and they
Wow.
allow for external rotation. So that's why if you have chronic hip pain and we go in and we trigger point an obturator internus or a piriformis, so when you think that people can go and access a piriformis, no you can't. Good luck. You can get it inside, but you're not getting it outside. So yeah, so there's there's tons of muscles, and then here we've got the ischiocavernosus muscles, we've got the bulbospongiosus muscles, like there's a whole series of muscles just on the outside that are muscles of sexual function. And then the urethral sphincters, and they all have their own names. Yeah,
A lot of muscles.
everywhere, yeah.
So the pre-pregnancy training, do you usually only recommend that for those that are like literally just found out they're pregnant and then prior to giving birth, or even before they even get pregnant?
Yeah, I always encourage moms who have daughters, I'm like, get them to come in here when they start having sex and just get them familiar with their pelvic floor, and if they get pregnant, then that's something you do during the whole pregnancy period, right? And certainly as the baby starts getting heavier and heavier, it's kind of weight training for that pelvic floor, so it's a good time to condition. The big things though with pregnancy training is learning how to push and also how to position yourself.
Which they technically, is like when they do those Lamaze class things, is that their intention, but they probably missed the mark obviously from your okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They teach you how to breathe, right? But they don't teach you how to breathe when you're trying to get a baby out. It's very different.
They missed the mark.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the sad thing too is that at the 6 week
Why are they supposed to
checkup
tell them
afterwards, the obstetrician just sends you on your way. Right? Like you come and visit, whether you're leaking, there's no referrals on after that point, which is what now I'm trying to tap into, but it's a lot because my focus right now is, like I said, doing that PhD on male prostatectomy and the role of actually treating them before they have their prostate removed, and we're trying to see if we can reduce the amount of incontinence after they've had that removed.
Yeah.
So just try to remove the burden before it happens, right? But so for me to get into the whole obstetric world, again, that's even another field within the field that I do, right? And so
That's pretty big.
yeah, and it's not that I do treat a lot of these women. It's just to go and raise awareness in that region now, and there's some, but it's a lot of work to get into doctors, and you've got to really be selective with who it is you're going to pursue your craft with, right?
Yeah.
You can't be a master of everything,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yes.
Scoliosis, helpful?
Yes.
Okay.
Very.
How?
So the posture, unit 3. So the spinal alignment is massive, right? And any kind of compromised torsion of the spine or flexion or rotation of the spine could interrupt the impulses that are traveling from the nerves out, from the spinal cord out. And because several of those nerves radiate into the pelvic region and then into the abdominal area and then also into the cavity, that impulse or that reduced impulse transmission is going to affect the function of those muscles, right? So it's really important to keep as much mobility and movement as we can through that area. And then ultimately, as well as if you're compromised in a certain posturing, you can create pressure on the pelvic floor by not being able to extend and unrotate, right? So that can put a lot of pressure down there. And then, as you know, the whole goal is to see if we can get pressure off, right? And if you're stuck in this position, you can't, when you breathe too, you're also going to have a limited breathing capacity. You're not going to breathe anywhere into this area, right? So it's really important to try to unwind and get as much extension as we can out of that. Obviously understanding that it's most of the time pretty fixed, but it's better to try and move it to see what kind of mobility you can get out of the spine. Mm-hmm. Any more questions? All right. Well, thank you again, guys, so much. This was a lot of fun. And I hope to see some of you guys. Maybe not. Maybe you don't want to see me, but certainly go and see a pelvic floor physio if you think that you're suffering. Okay. And I wish you all a new life.
Thank you.